E.T. and Superman 64. Both considered to be the worst game of all time. However, there really hasn't been there's a lot of argument as to which is worse. So I'm here to determine which of these terrible games is worse. Just so you know, I'm lucky enough to not have played either of these terrible games. However, I have done my fair share of research on them, so I know enough about them to make this video. Now, before you say that it's a no-brainer that Superman 64 is going to win this category because it's at least 3 console generations ahead of E.T., let me explain for a second. I'm judging these games on their graphics for the console's standard, and both these games, for the most part, kind of are pretty much the standard for their console. However, E.T. has one major trump card: the title screen. Granted, this may look bad for or today's standards, but back then, this is actually really good graphic-wise, and many people say that this is the best part of the game. Point for E.T. Before you go saying that I can't pass a judgment on this since I haven't played either of these games, I have done my research, and the footage does speak for itself. Superman 64's controls are infamous for being terrible. Not to mention, just looking at the footage, not knowing anything prior to the game, the controls even look like they don't work very well. As terrible stuff they say about this game, and as bad of a game people say this is, and they complain about so much stuff in it, no one really ever seems to complain about the controls. That's like the one thing in this game that no one really complains about, and the footage doesn't look like the controls are bad. Point for E.T. Now, this is a bit of an odd category, but hear me out. In order to beat a game, there's always some sort of objective that you have to achieve, unless it's a game that you don't beat, like Minecraft. Well, these games, you're lucky if you can figure out what it is that you're supposed to do in the first place. Not only does E.T. never explain what it is you actually have to do, but it's cryptic. So there's like a huge world and you have to jump into pits to find pieces of a phone and go somewhere and wait for time to run out for E.T. to phone home. But it takes forever, and so many people couldn't figure out that there was a huge amount of returned game. In Superman 64, while the text that shows up tells you what to do is brief, it does tell you what to do, and plus, it makes sense. For example, performing heroic deeds or flying through the rings. You can fly, and you obviously have to fly through the rings. I mean, why else would they be there? Many video games have enemies that you have to deal with. Both these games have very frustrating enemies. Superman 64 has enemies that have guns, but all you can use to defend yourself is a punch. Yeah, that's fair. Despite this, E.T.'s enemies are even worse. Not only are they undefeatable, but one of them steals your inventory, which is really hard to get, and you need to complete the game. And the other supposedly drags E.T. to his house, which takes you so far off course. Point to Superman 64. Both of these terrible games possess a video game cliche that I cannot stand: time limits. ET actually doesn't have a time limit, but it does have something similar, a step limit. Basically, it limits the amount of steps you can take in the game before you die. So, you don't have to feel rushed, but you do have a limit. Superman 64, on the other hand, not only has an actual time limit, but a time limit that is so constricting that you basically have to be perfect just to make it. And don't bother going around to get one of the rings, because you'll just waste enough time that you'll fail anyway. And the final category worth double points is Superman 64's gameplay truly is terrible. The rings that you have to fly through, if you miss just like 3 of them, probably that at most, then you have to start all over. And this game limits Superman of his powers, so that's and he has to pick up power-ups that to use powers that he normally would have on his own. For example, let's say you're a person and you can run. Then all of a sudden, if someone makes a video game about you, you have to get a special collectible in order to be able to run. Yeah, that's bad. But at least in Superman 64, you get to fly around the city and stuff, which is kinda neat, and take out bad guys. Granted, the controls are terrible, but you get to save people and stuff that Superman would normally do, which in turn is pretty cool. ET, on the other hand, has you going around this field, which is just plain confusing, looking for parts, and falling into pits to find them, and your parts will probably be taken away. And let's not mention the infamous glitch where E.T. will go directly back into the hole right after he gets out. Anyway, let's go to the final score. In conclusion, Superman 64 is a terrible game. However, the thing is, stuff you do is like Superman, and this game probably would have been decent if it just weren't for the terrible controls. With E.T., on the other hand, really the only redeeming factor about this game is, well, the title screen. I'm Cardboard Box Production.